Good evening, friends. You are most welcome to Think channel. Today we are discussing the second ERC report and ethics in governance. Our topic is ethical framework for legislators. Among the four pillars of the ideal democratic structure, the legislature has the most important position. It is the expression of the will of the people and the executive is answerable to it. This demands that the requirement of ethical standards for the executive must be preceded by an equally emphatic requirement of ethical standards for legislators. One way of avoiding conflict between public and private interest is through disclosure of one's interest. This by itself cannot resolve the conflict of interest but is a good first step as it acknowledges the possibility of such a conflict. Legislatures in different countries have adopted different approaches to this issue. In some countries, the automatic outcome of such a disclosure is abstention from participation in the decision making process, whereas in other countries, the decision is left the decision is left to the chair. In India, disclosure of interest is provided in both houses of the parliament. In different ways, it has been ruled by the chairman of the Rajya Sabha and the member having a personal, pecuniary, or direct interest on a matter before the House is required, while taking part in the proceedings in the matter, to declare the nature of the interest. The rules of procedures and conduct of business in the Lok Sabha prescribes that if the vote of a member in a division in the House is challenged on grounds of personal, pecuniary, or direct interest in the matter to be decided, the Speaker may examine the issue and decide whether the vote of the member should be disallowed or not, and his decision shall be final. Further, there is Committee on Ethics in both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, the Committee on Ethics of the Rajya Sabha. Chapter 24 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in the Council of State provides for constitution of the Committee on Ethics to oversee the moral and ethical conduct of members. The following is the existing framework of code of conduct for members of the Rajya Sabha. The members of Rajya Sabha should acknowledge their responsibility to maintain the public trust reposed in them and should work diligently to discharge their mandate for the common good of the people. They must hold in high esteem the Constitution, the law, parliamentary institutions, and above all, the general public. They should constantly strive to translate the ideas laid down in the preamble to the Constitution into a reality. The following are the principles which they should abide by in their dealings. First is members must not do anything that brings disrepute to the parliament and affects their credibility. Second is members must utilize their positions as members of parliament to advance general well-being of the people. Third is in their dealings, if members find that there is a conflict between their personal interest and the public trust which they hold, they should resolve such a conflict in a manner that their private interests are subordinate to the duty of their public office. Fourth is members should always see that their private financial interest and those of the members of their immediate family do not come in conflict with the public interest, and if any such conflict ever arise, they should try to resolve such a conflict in a manner that the public interest is not jeopardized. Fifth is members should never expect or accept any fee, remuneration, remuneration or benefits for a vote given or not given by them on the floor of the House, for introducing a bill, for moving a resolution, putting a question, or abstaining from asking a question or participating in the deliberation of the House or a parliamentary committee. Sixth is members should not take a gift which may interfere with honest and impartial discharge of their official duties. They may, however, accept incidental gifts or inexpensive mementos, MENTOS, mementos, and customary hospitality. Seventh is members holding public office should use public resources in such a manner as may lead to public good. Eighth, if members are in possession of confidential information owing to their being members of parliament or members of parliamentary committees, they should not disclose such information for advancing their personal interest. Ninth, members should desist. Members should desist from giving certificates to individuals and institutions of which they have no personal knowledge and are not based on facts. Tenth is members should not lend ready support to any cause of which they have no or little knowledge. 11th, members should not misuse the facilities and amenities made available to them. 12th, members should not be disrespectful to any religion and work for the promotion of secular values. 13th, members should keep uppermost in their mind the fundamental duties listed in the Part 4A of the Constitution. 14. Members are expected to maintain high standards of morality, dignity, decency, and values in the public life. Second part is the Committee on Ethics of the Lok Sabha. There is a committee on ethics of the Lok Sabha to oversee the moral and ethical conduct of members of that house. The Committee on Ethics 13 Lok Sabha in the first report observed that norms of ethical behavior for members have been adequately provided for in the rules of procedures and conduct of business in the Lok Sabha. Directions by the Speaker and in the conventions which have evolved over the years on the basis of recommendations made by various parliamentary committees. Apart from existing norms, the committee recommended that the members should abide by the following general ethical principles. First is members must utilize their position to advance general well-being of the people. Second, in case of conflict between their personal interest and public interest, they must resolve the conflict so that personal interests are subordinate to the duty of the public office. Third is conflict between private financial or family interest should be resolved in a manner that the public interest is not jeopardized. Fourth is members holding public office should use public resources in such a manner as may lead to the public good. Fifth is members must keep uppermost in their mind the fundamental duties listed in the Part 4 of the Constitution. Sixth is members should maintain high standards of morality, dignity, and decency values in the public life. Only a few state legislatures such as Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, etc. have adopted code of conduct for their legislatures. While the enunciation of ethical values and code of conduct puts moral pressure on public functionaries, they need to be backed by an effective monitoring and enforcement regime. Legislatures Legislatures the world over have adopted different models for this purpose. The Canadian Conflict of Interest and Post Employment Code for Public Office Holders 2006 relies on an ethics commissioner to oversee the code and to provide advice. The Canadian Conflict of Interest and Post Employment Code for Public Office Holders 2006 relies on an ethics commissioner to oversee the code and to provide advice. The ethics commissioner is an officer of the parliament appointed under section 72.01 of the Parliament of Canada Act. The Commissioner reports on the inquiries he conducts pursuant to the Members' Code and makes annual report to the House of Commons on his activities in relation to its members. Based on the recommendations of the Nolan Committee, the House of Commons has established the Office of Parliamentary Commissioners for Standards. The Commissioners' main responsibilities are overseeing the maintenance and monitoring the operation of register of members' interest, providing advice on the confidential basis to individual members and to the select committee on standards and privileges about the interpretation of the code of conduct and guide to the rules relating to the conduct of members, preparing guidance and providing training for members on matters of conduct, propriety, and ethics, monitoring the operations of code of conduct and guide to the rules and where appropriate proposing possible modification of it to the committee, monitoring the operation of the code of conduct and guide to the rules and where appropriate proposing possible modification of it to the committee, receiving and investigating complaints about members who are allegedly in breach of the code of conduct and guide to the rules and reporting his findings to the committee. In addition, the Commissioner's Office is responsible for maintaining and monitoring the operation of various registers and lists, providing advice about them, and receiving and investigating complaints about them. Thus, the second ARC recommendations to constitute an office of Ethics Commissioner by each House of the Parliament. This office, functioning under the Speaker or Chairman, would assist the Committee on Ethics in the discharge of its functions and advise members when required and maintain necessary records. Further, to maintain ethics in legislature, second ARC recommended that the law should be amended to define office of profit based on the following principles. All office in purely advisory bodies where the experiences, insights, and expertise of the legislature would be inputs in governmental policy shall not be treated as offices of profit irrespective of the remuneration and perks associated with such an office. Second is all offices involving executive decision making and control of the public funds, including positions on the governing boards of the public undertakings and statutory and non-statutory authorities directly deciding policies or managing institutions or authorizing or approving expenditure shall be treated as office of profit and no legislator shall hold such offices. Third is if a serving minister by virtue of office is a member of a head of certain organization. If a serving minister by virtue of office is a member or head of certain organization like a planning commission where close coordination and integration between the council ministers and organization or authority or committee is vital for the day-to-day functioning of the government, it shall not be treated as office of profit. The use of discretionary funds at the disposal of legislators. The power to determine specific projects and schemes or select the beneficiaries or authorize expenditure shall constitute discharge of executive functions and will invite disqualification under Article 102 and Article 191, irrespective of whether or not a new office is notified and held. Hence, schemes such as MPLADS, MPLADS, and MPLALADS, MLALADS, MPLADS, and MLALDS should be abolished. Such schemes like MP-LADS and MLA-LADS should be abolished. Members of the Parliament and members of the state legislature should be declared as the public authorities under the Right to Information Act except when They are discharging legislative functions, code of ethics or for civil servants. Code of ethics for civil servants. The inculcation of values facilitating the subordination of the self to a large societal good and in engendering a spirit of empathy for those in need of ameliorative, AMELIORATIVE, ameliorative state interventions are not skills which could be easily embedded after joining the civil services. The inculcation of values facilitating the subordinate of the self to a large societal goods and engendering a spirit of empathy for those in need of ameliorative state interventions are not skills which could be easily embedded imbibed imbibed after joining the civil services. Such attitudes need nurturing over not merely individual lifetimes but through successive generations. The right ethos takes long to evolve. It must also be acceptable that it must also be accepted that the existing framework for maintaining and promoting the norms of right conduct cannot be enforced through a rigid, mindless enforcement of laws and rules. It is all a question of striking the right balance. Within the civil services, there are formal, enforceable codes setting out norms of expected behavior with sanctions prescribed for unacceptable departures from such norms. There are also inchoate INCHOAT inchoate convention. There are also inchoate conventions of propriety and acceptable behavior without formal sanctions, but with non-observance of such practices and conventions attracting social disapproval and stigma. The current set of enforceable norms are conducted rules typified by the Central Civil Service Conduct Rules 1964 and analogous rules applicable to the members of the All India Service or employees of various state governments. The code of behavior as enunciated in the conduct rules, while containing some general norms like maintaining integrity and absolute devotions to duty and not indulging in conduct unbecoming of government servant, is generally directed towards cataloging specific activities deemed undesirable for government servants. There is no code of ethics prescribed for civil servants in India, although such codes exist in other countries. A draft public service bill now under consideration of Ministry of Personal Public Grievance and Pensions seek to lay down a number of generic expectations from civil servants which are referred to as values. The silent values envisaged in the bill are allegiance to the various ideals enshrined in the preamble to the Constitution, a political functioning, good governance for betterment of the people to be primary goal of civil service, duty to act objectively and impartially, accountability and transparency in decision making, maintenance of highest ethical standards, merit to be the criteria in selection of service civil servants, consistent however with the cultural, ethnic and other diversities of the nation, ensuring economy and avoidance of wastage in expenditure, provision of healthy and congenial work environment, communication, consultation, and cooperation in performance of functions, and participations of all levels of personnel and management. The draft bill also advises a public service code and a public service management code laying, laying down laying down more specific duties and responsibilities. Violation of the code would invite punishments akin to the current major and minor penalties by the heads of institutions and organizations A public service authority is also envisaged to oversee implementation of the code and values indicated above and to render advice in the matter of the values and the code. The Commission has decided that the detailed examination of the proposed draft bill will be appropriately made in its forthcoming report on civil services reform. The various issues discussed above are not significantly only for the civil services. The various issues discussed above are not significant only for the civil services, they are important for all segments of the bureaucracy and equally so for all local bodies and their employees. After the 73rd and the 74th Amendments of the Constitution, the local bodies now have an important role to play in the nation's development and have major executive powers. It is essential that the need for relevant courts for these bodies and their employees and for any public authority it is recognized. Ethical framework for the judiciary. Independence of the judiciary is inextricably linked with judicial ethics, and an independent judiciary enjoying public confidence is a basic necessity of the rule of law. Any conduct on the part of a judge which demonstrates a lack of the integrity and dignity will undermine the trust reposed in the judiciary by the citizens. The conduct of a judge should therefore always be above, above reproach. Always be above reproach. The closely related aspect of the accountability of judges is the mechanism for removal of judges for deviant behavior other than impeachment under Article 124 Clause 4 and Article 217 Clause 1. There is no mechanism to proceed against any inappropriate behavior or misdemeanor. I am misdemeanor of judges. At the time of framing the Constitution, it was felt that judicial conventions and norms would constitute strong checks. However, the impeachment provisions have turned out to be impracticable, as it is virtually impossible to initiate any impeachment proceedings, let alone successfully conclude them. There are five stages, all of them difficult to accomplish. First is a mandatory presentation of not less than 100 Lok Sabha members or 50 Rajya Sabha members for giving notice. At the second stage, the speaker or the chairman has to admit the motion. If he does not admit it, the matter ends there. In the third stage, if there is one, a committee is appointed to conduct an inquiry. The fourth stage is that the committee makes a report and forwards it to the speaker or the chairman. The fifth and final stage is reached when the two houses of the parliament proceed to act in the manner prescribed by Section 6 of Clause 3, Section 6 of Clause 3 of the Judges Inquiry Act. Inadequacy of the existing mechanism was affirmed in the K. Veeraswamy case 1991 and the infructuous impeachment proceedings in the case of V. Ramaswamy even after adverse findings of Judges Committee under the Judges Inquiry Act 1968. And second, ARC recommended for the constitution of NJAC, which has already been done. Apart from that, it had recommended that the National Judicial Council should be authorized to lay down the code of conduct for judges, including the subordinate judiciary. The National Judicial Council should be entrusted to task the National Judicial Council should be entrusted the task of oversight of the judges and should be empowered to inquire into alleged misconduct and impose minor penalties. It can also recommend removal of a judge if so warranted. Based on the recommendations of the NJC, the President should have the powers to remove a Supreme Court or High Court judge, Article 124 of the Constitution may be amended to provide for the National Judicial Council. A similar change will have to be made in Article 217. Also, since the Council is to have the authority to oversee and discipline judges, further changes will need it further changes will need to be made to Article 217 clause 4. A judge of the Supreme Court should be designated as a judicial values commissioner. He or she should be assigned the task of enforcing the code of conduct. Similar arrangements should be made in the High Court. Thank you very much.